Hey everyone, so now that we have our first Payback S-Class toon in Shiva, I'm just going to kind of go over her and talk about what I like and what I don't like about her. I know that she's been out for a little bit now, so a lot of people have pulled her, and a lot of people obviously haven't. I know I'm a bit late on my video, but as I've mentioned before, I have been dealing with a concussion, so I am behind on everything and I apologize. At this time, I just want to remind you guys to like and subscribe for more content and information. So I remember ages ago people were asking for a range Shiva where she would like throw her claws, and it seems like we finally have one. Now, Shiva is one of my favorite characters from the TV show, and I know she's a fan favorite from the comics as well. She's just a really cool toon to have, and I think part of it's because we have so few animal characters. Like we have Kyle who has his falcon, but the falcon doesn't actually attack. We have Marlin and Rosie, where Rosie is the primary attacker. But other than those two other characters, and then the multiple forms of Shiva, we don't have a lot of other animals, and I think animals are just pretty cool. So Shiva as a 5-star is pretty interesting. 45 AP, which is very fast. Her rush, it removes focus from up to 2 enemies. They also get taunted and disarmed for 2 turns, and then she gets some bonus HP. So this is pretty effective. It reminds me of Elle, how when she rushes, she removes focus as well and forces that taunt. But what makes Shiva even better is that she actually disarms the enemy. So that means no double attack weapons, it means no stun on attack, it means no impair on attack. It just takes away a lot from the offensive toon or the defensive toon, because I have talked about this, about how you can run a payback toon on attack effectively, especially when the defense is a fast rushing team. It's just a great way to counter people who use a Rav on defense. So if a Rav rushes Shiva right away, then the amount of damage that's paid back would be huge, especially with her being a 5-star. I think she'd also be effective in the 5-star arena on defense, because anyone who has a turn 1 attack team, if they're not able to kill her with basic attacks, the rush would end up causing the attacker to lose at least 1 toon, if not 2 or 3, depending on how much damage is actually paid back. As per usual, Shiva does have a bound weapon, and when you think about it, this seems pretty logical, because being an animal, it's not like we can give her a knife or some other like melee weapon to actually hold. So by having these bound weapons, it just logically makes sense. As a 5-star, her weapon is pretty bad in my opinion. 20% attack, a minor bonus to AP when attacking, which is, I'm not even sure if that's 1 AP or 2 AP, but it's a really small amount because it's a small bonus to AP when it's 2. So minor, I don't even know. And the 15% HP is also quite low. So as a 5-star, she's not very wow, but as a 6-star, she does get better. Her stats go up, so she has a bit more defense, more HP, more attack. It's all kind of balanced, to be honest, which is kind of curious in some ways. Her rush, it becomes 76 AP. Still, she removes focus from up to 2 enemies. They get taunted and disarmed for 2 turns, and then she gains 50% bonus HP. So this bonus HP will obviously help with taking damage from the opponent, so long as she's not being bled out, because if she taunts a lacerator into her, for example, this will double the bleed. So this is a quick way to get through a toon's HP, because it ignores bonus HP. And the other abilities that also ignore bonus HP are Maim and Burn. So I'm iffy on that HP. I'm glad that there's no bonus defense. But it's also important to remember that if she's taunting enemies into her and she's removing focus, they are forced to attack her, but they will not trigger her payback ability. Because it's not like Bide. If she was a Bide toon and she was forcing this, like Elle, then I think we would be in more trouble, because she would be triggered continuously, in my opinion. Here, she's just not going to use her payback ability unless you end up rushing her. So her active skill is kind of interesting. She can recover all penalties, and she has an AP gain. Now, recovering all penalties is dangerous only because there's trauma out there. So if she's taunting enemies into her, and say trauma is applied to her, and then a toon has a burn mod or a bleed mod or both, if she ends up recovering those 2 abilities, that could be up to like 6,000 trauma damage if it's Angel, who applies 3,000 trauma to her. So this active skill is a little dangerous. It can be very useful because not many people have very strong trauma toons on attack. The plus 20 AP is interesting because it's not a percent, it's a flat amount, it's either 25 or 26% of the 76 AP, meaning even if she's exhausted, she's only going to get 20% of the AP gain taken away from her from exhaust. So like an Angel of 500 exhaust, this would be 1,000 maim damage, for example, which can also be avoided by having a maim resist mod or an exhaust resist mod on her. So there's just lots of options there. Now I will say Shiva's bound weapon gets a huge boost, so when she's being attacked, she has a better chance to cause 1,000 bleed damage to the enemy for one turn. So that works really well with her rush, where she's forcing toons to attack her and they're disarmed. So unless they have like a bleed resist mod, you have a decent chance of actually applying 1,000 bleed. And if she's on defense and you're using your attack team to attack her, well, 1,000 HP loss is actually quite a lot, especially because we usually have a low amount of HP compared to our attack when we're attacking, obviously. So this is pretty effective, and it only gets better as she becomes an S-Class toon. I'm a little surprised that she has 30% attack on her bound weapons. It kind of makes me think of Zhai Feng, how she also has the same, but with her, as well as with Shiva, I think having HP would be more valuable, especially with Shiva being a payback toon and Wei Feng using bleed as her main attacking component, so it's a little confusing to me. And now when we move on to Shiva as an S-Class toon, obviously her stats increase. She has more attack, more defense, and more HP. Her rush stays the same from a 6-star to an S-Class, which has been pretty typical as of late. Now, my fear for her as an S-Class toon is that her defensive stat is so high. So unless you're specifically countering a Rav, for example, I'm not sure what else she will trigger other than maybe Priya. But when you have a toon like Princess, who can normalize, and Princess would taunt her, Shiva would not be able to actually use her active skill to recover from it. And when a toon is normalized, their specialist skill is basically impaired for however many turns the normalize lasts. So I don't think Shiva is a huge game changer. I do think she's an effective toon, especially being a payback toon, but I would have liked to see her defense be a little bit lower compared to her HP. I also think that 6-star payback toons are more effective than Shiva would be on an offensive team if you're trying to trigger those turn 1 defense teams, just because the 6-star toons will likely die, but it also means they have lower defense, meaning the amount of damage that is reflected back or paid back on the enemy is much higher. With Shiva having such a high defense, it really mitigates the effect of running a payback toon on attack if you're trying to trigger someone like a Rav. Now, I'm not saying Shiva is bad. I really do like her rush. I think it can give you a lot of control, but there are also a number of ways to control Shiva herself. If you disarm her weapon, then it's a free attack on her. You can stun her, you can taunt her, confuse her, impair her, normalize her. There's just so many different ways that you could stop her at this point, and I'm not exactly sure what I would want to see changed on a toon like this, but if you didn't pull for this toon, I would say you're still okay. Lots of people don't have that turn 1 rushing Arav attack team anyway, although I would say she is a good counter, but as I've mentioned before, any payback toon on defense is kind of a good counter to the turn 1 Arav attack team, because there's no way to normalize a toon on the first turn, meaning you're going to trigger that payback one way or another. As I've mentioned previously, Shiva's bound weapon does get a bit of an upgrade, where when being attacked, a better chance to cause 2,000 bleed damage. So that 2,000 bleed damage is very significant, in my opinion, because attacking toons, if it's a 6-star toon, it might not even have 2,000 HP. So it means you're really going to have to be mindful when you attack this toon, because although it's not you're being stunned or impaired or confused, you are taking immediate damage potentially. And now we're just going to move into some game film where I found some Shivas on defensive teams. And it's a bit of an interesting approach because there's about a 35% chance of triggering that bleed. And this team that I'm running right now does not have Glenn, which means I can't recover that bleed. I could recover it with Mercer if I had upgraded his active skill, but I like keeping Mercer's active skill low. It's just I've noticed too many times on a defensive team, Mercer using his active skill on the first or second turn instead of actually attacking, and I'd rather have him use his rush overall. Now, right now, the team I'm attacking with is very effective because I have an attack up with Alice and a defense down with Dale, and then I'm just overpowering the defensive team. So I found that team to be very effective. Now, this next match, I'm using kind of my typical attack team that you guys see all the time in video. That first attack team that I showed you, it's something that I'm working on, and it's not completely done, but I'm hoping I might be able to run it a bit in War this weekend. So this defensive team is a little tricky just because there's Slater as well in there, and he can command anyone and cause a lot of havoc. But as you see, I was able to mostly contain. I was able to impair and defense down the enemy, at least 3 of their toons, and now it's just Mercer and Slater left. The thing is, Slater has that active skill to revive a toon, and I'm lucky there that Pete didn't end up rushing. I'm not exactly sure why he didn't. I thought he had 100% AP, so I'm a little confused there, but I'm going to take it because it is a success for me. So far from what I found when attacking these Shivas, because I'm using a Rampage double attack weapon on Priya, which is all basic attacks, I'm not being affected by that Payback very much. And just taking a look at my normal attack team, what I think has been effective for me is that I've changed my Cole to be my Disarming Cole, who gives that plus 30 crit chance to any toons in a line, which in this case is Priya, which will trigger Rampage more often. So right now my team is working very well because I'm able to incorporate that disarm ability, which means I'm disarming stun guns, I'm disarming impair weapons, and Shiva's bleed claws. Now this next team that I also ran is very offensive, I find, because I have both a defense down as well as an attack up, plus Alice can double as a reviver. By using my Secretary Gao, he's like a slower version of Dr. Stevens, so I found him to be a very effective toon on my team. I'm actually going to be doing another video on him, just to kind of show you guys how I've been leveraging him. Overall, I do think Shiva is a pretty good character. I think that there's a lot of things she's susceptible to, but I think under the right team and circumstances, she could be very effective. Thank you everyone for watching and listening to my video.